Welcome, everybody. Very, very excited and happy to have you all here today for the panel for James Knott's The Apocalypse in Your Bedroom tour. The film, it's maybe not a tour, it's just the film this time.
It's everything.
It's everything. Love it. My name's Kara Spooner, and I work at Rendezvous with Madness and Workman Arts, which is the producing body for Rendezvous. And before we begin, just want to acknowledge the Indigenous land in which I am on and our panelists are on today, as well as the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Mississaugas of the Credit. And we recognize that this is what it is. It's an acknowledgement, and that there is ongoing work to be done to honor our treaty responsibilities as settlers and artists and institutions. And if you're tuning in from another place in Canada or internationally, to also think about your treaty rights as well. And before I introduce our fabulous panel, we do have an active listener with us tonight named Christine. And you can contact her by phone, talk, or text at 1-289-779-4114, or by email at CHRISTEN.SALIK@gmail.com. And all of that information is also on the project page for Apocalypse in Your Bedroom. We really value kind of diving into, difficult content sometimes at Rendezvous. And if you feel like you need someone to talk with, Christine is here to support us. And we also know that you all respect your own boundaries and know the kind of support that you need. And we hope that you seek that out when you do need it. And also, we really value inclusivity, anti-oppression, and safety, and we believe that everyone has a role to play. So in terms of tonight's panel, for you asking questions, just to keep that in mind and be a part of that work that we're doing together. And if you want to ask a question, you can type it into the chat box, and we will hopefully be able to get to most of them, if not all of them. And without further ado, I'd really like to introduce Francisco-Fernando Granados, who's our moderator for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And James Knott, who is the creator and performer and brilliance behind Apocalypse in Your Bedroom. So I'm going to turn my camera off, enjoy the panel, and I'll be around to help out with some of the audience questions in a bit. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Cara. Thank you, Rendezvous. Thank you to everybody doing accessibility service. And thank you so much, James, for asking me to have the chance to talk to you a little bit about this work. I mean, I guess I'd like to start by asking you a little bit about the process of going from the performance and the different incarnations that the performance has had to the film.
Yeah, well, I guess it's like, I kind of see it, I mean, first and foremost, I identify as a multidisciplinary artist, especially like in the context of not even just 2020, but just like the world as it is now. I don't really see the point in limiting yourself to any specific medium. I think that it's sort of form for concept. So like I often tell people that it's like you want to tailor the media to be the best fit for whatever concept it is. But also I think that, if a concept is kind of like worth interest, you're going to kind of want to explore it in a few different ways. Like you can see like how you can be malleable with the content in different forms and sort of extrapolate little different like corners that maybe would be missed in a different medium. So I mean, with like the film, like you have the chance to maybe see things up close that you wouldn't necessarily be able to see if like you're in an audience, or like it afforded me the ability to play with the collage a little bit more and actually integrating myself maybe more seamlessly in some of those images. So it's not like the idea of translating the apocalypse work into a film isn't something that was unconsidered. I wasn't necessarily planning on doing it anytime soon, but I guess like the opportunity arose. So it was, and I mean, as I was telling Kara earlier, in hindsight, now that I've done it, I almost wish that I had made a little bit more planning, or had a little bit more time to sort of do things in a way that would facilitate like the ease of using the medium. Because that was the other thing too, was because I was curated as a performance, and then when in-person performances were canceled, I didn't want to just record a performance documentation and put it up. I mean, 7A11D already has a really great performance documentation of the work. And I didn't want to just do a live stream thing, because as you mentioned earlier, I had done a live stream version of the work, which I think also needed to be treated differently. So I was like, if it has to be single channel and it has to be sort of like film-ish, why not just like lean into the medium? And that was basically the process of like making sure that I was utilizing the medium to the best of its abilities, instead of like it just being like a pale use of the format.
That makes sense. I mean, one of the things that watching it yesterday really struck me was the way in which the work has sort of expanded over different kinds of media, but also over time. Because at certain points, having watched it as part of your thesis show at OCAD and then at 7A11D, in some of the sections later on in the performance, there are moments where I can see 2018 James performing the work alongside 2020 James performing the work. And I think the question that brought up for me was questions around character building, character writing versus self-making, and perhaps more specifically after watching it again yesterday, self-making as an artist, with all of the expectations in a way, and in some ways with all of the ideas around the kinds of sort of hardship one is meant to go through, or the kind of established ideas of art's relationship to suffering, or all of these things. And so there was something about watching you perform it, not just across different medias, but also across time, that was extremely moving for me. How did that process of melding the different layers of the work sort of shift the work for you? And how do you think of this relationship between character and self in the work?
Well, I guess it's like the work in a way is about what was I gonna say? It's kind of just about like what makes you, like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like a philosophical extrapolation of like what makes a person, and like what makes them fit in. And so like, even though there might be like different characters, like they're all played by me. And in a sense, they all sort of represent like different parts of the self in an inner dialogue. So I maybe also that's like the way that like approaching like anything like as a writer, like I feel like you kind of only really can write from your own experience. Like you might try to put your mind in a situation that you've never been in before, but you're not going to be able to approach the equation like someone who's been in that situation, which can be for better or for worse. So in terms of like approaching like character building or writing, like no matter what I do, it's going to be filtered by me. I mean, I've been, haven't touched them in a while, but I've been writing a bunch of short stories, and they're all character sketches. And even though like all of the characters like maybe come from different circumstances or live the world in a very different way, I mean, they're all kind of like extrapolations of like, even if it's just like a thought that I've had, that like the mimesis of that thought was like me. So the ruse of it all is that like you may be looking at like 12 different characters, but they're actually the same person. So maybe that makes me a failure in that sense. And in terms of like time, I guess also because of the show's approach to malleability of the person. So it's like if a person's able to put on a million different guises in order to like confront themselves with several questions, then that can also that it doesn't come to a head when like it's confronted with time. So it's like you said, it's like, you know, I'm dancing with like a recording of myself from 2016, actually. Some of the, like, for instance, like the Elton John, actually that might've been 2017, early 2017, with me in the brown shirt. So, and then it's like, I mean, in a way, like, I don't like necessarily look a whole lot different, although I mean, you know, I had bangs or whatever, I'm wearing a brown shirt, or my glasses are different, but in a way, it almost speaks to the relevance of like how these conversations permeate in inside, don't know words, through time as well, you know, or like how like you're sort of confronted with these demons occasionally, or not occasionally, cyclically, and how like, you know, even like problems that you may be facing now are rooted in something that like has happened before. So it's like in order to like confront that, like you almost have to like transport yourself into like the inner psyche of like the little you that's like in the principal's office at like 7 years old or whatever. Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
Well, yes. I mean, and I think, see, what to me it is the triumph of it for me is the ability for all of those facets to sort of become dimensioned, you know, through the layers. So, I mean, you mentioned the writing, and some of the, something that also came through for me as a very fresh layer of the work watching it in this iteration was just through the captioning, being able to really see and feel your writing, you know, and seeing and feeling the voices coming in and out. In some ways, almost in an almost collage-like way, right? With like David Bowie coming in and out, and Elton John coming in and out, and you know, all the different ways in which there's songwriting that's done from scratch from you, and sampling with lyrics that are written by you, downright covers, but also dancing where, you know, it's the original track. Can you talk a little bit about this writing process? Like, is there something akin to collage, you know, in the same way that that is very clear in the visual layering of it? How do you think of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I would say that like my approach to everything is as like a collagist. I mean, even like as I'm like describing like the video editing process, especially to like my students who like, they might be painters and they might like not be able to like comprehend the format. I mean, I always describe it as collage, and that like you're basically taking like your source material and then you're deciding to cut. I mean, we're using that language, right? Cut into it and like take out specific images and paste them in a specific sequence and overlap them, and you can rearrange them, and you can really look at it as like a malleable, fluid thing as opposed to this weird like concrete. And so I kind of take that approach to everything that I do. And then, you know, because the work deals so much with layers, right up into the writing and right up into the references that I'm making, and how those can change over time. So it's like, one thing that I did, and a lot of these ideas actually come by accident too. I don't remember how I stumbled upon it, but so in this iteration, at the end of the first number where I'm dancing to David Bowie's Fame, I sort of like do like an interpolation of the Earth, Wind and Fire song that plays at the end. And I don't know, I must have been just sort of like mumbling it to, I think that's what it was, is I was editing the sequence with the photographs. And that sample of that song is actually from, so a few years ago, maybe a long time ago now, my parents gave me a birthday card with like a pre-recorded message. So you hear that message and then the song plays right after. I don't know why. And then I guess while I was editing it, I must have been mumbling it. And I was like, that's a really interesting like echo of that sentiment. Like how, and then I felt like it also fit really well with the music at the beginning. So I was like, that would be an interesting foreshadowing, premonition kind of thing to like tie everything in. So I just sort of added that. And it's a lot about like taking these references and like layering them in and out of each other. It almost as like, I've been like obsessed with the idea of like speaking in tongues. And so, and like what that would be. And then, you know, and how that kind of like almost goes back to, you know, cause this work I made before I was thinking about that, but I have like the like soliloquy from like Hamlet, where I'm like sort of like reciting it in like tens of layers of whispers that are just like all sort of like coming in and out of each other. And also in terms of like the collaging of different references and like my own material and whatnot, I think that, you know, there's a time when like you're the only person in a room that can say something. And then there's other times where it's like, I know that that person said it better than me. So instead of like pretending like I'm like the original here, like I'd rather just be like an authentic echo, where it's like I in that moment I'm able to sort of take the reference sound, and then I'm allowed to sort of like add my own reverberance to it, and I'm allowed to decide when's the right timing of it to call back, and I'm allowed to decide like how I reshape that sound and then present it, you know, myself, even in a way that like, it's like, you understand that the source material still isn't me. And I'm not like being shy about that. I'm not like trying to be an imitation. I'm reshaping that sound. And so that's where like a lot of those things come from, is like, especially as I was writing it. Cause when I first started the project in 2016 as like a concept, I didn't think that I was necessarily going to like use covers or use pre-recorded material or anything like that. But as I was writing it, you know, there was a lot of moments where I was like, I really want to say this thing. I really want to do this thing, but I can't do that adequately. Like this person did it so much better. And then it got to the point where it was like, well, just let them say it and let me show what it does to me, right?
And that is a cinematic impulse, which is one of the things that perhaps felt incredibly well-rounded about this film version of it. It seems like we're going to shift into audience questions in just a couple of minutes, but maybe the last thing I'll ask you, because it's something that I'm really curious about now, is were there things that surprised you? Were there other things that surprised you as you reassembled the work in this version, kind of like finding the echo between the earth, wind, and fire, and the message in the birthday card?
Right. I mean, I'm sure there was. There was definitely lots of things that I like added or that I made new or added new references. I mean, like I think one major thing was like with the photographs, in like finding some photographs of my mom as a child or like as a young woman, or like finding photographs of like me and my brother as kids. Because before it was pretty much just photos of my dad's childhood and life. And then I was like, I needed to like update that sentiment to include these other people. And so that was nice. And it was actually, well, because a lot of these things came about of like, pandemic, being stuck in the house. So there's like lots of spring cleaning and lots of materials shifting around. So it was like, that was a lot of surprise. It was of me discovering these new materials. But in terms of other things, I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. I mean, there was a lot of like little things that I was like, I tweaked. And that's what I kind of do every time, is that even though like the core projection has always stayed the same, it was like, there was a lot of it that I tweaked for 7A11D. And there was some more things that I tweaked for when I performed in Hamilton, or that was like one thing. So it's like I've tweaked this, I think every time, is the initial bedroom scene between me and Jimmy the Fly. Has like gone through several aesthetic incarnations. And I feel like I'm most happy with this version, where like I literally just filmed corners in my room and implanted him in there, which I don't know why I just never did that before. I don't know. I had like a cutout like PNG of a bed on a white background the first time. And that was awful. I don't know why that was, yeah.
But that little sort of still life from the bedroom with the fly actually was something that I think I saw you work out in the version that you did for the live stream for the National Arts Center,
Yeah,
where
no,
you were moving things around.
yeah, that's probably where that came from too. Was it was like understanding how I got to play with this space, and sort of, you know, deciding to like siphon that concept and boil it down a little bit so that I was able to play with it in this context as well.
Absolutely. Kara, should we shift to audience questions? I'm not exactly sure that I can see them, but if there are some.
Yeah, for sure. So if anyone has questions, feel free to type them into the chat. And while we're waiting for some of those to come in, I have a question.
Oh.
I'm curious about the context of Rendezvous with Madness and how seeing this film with a kind of like a mental health lens might change or shift how people might be reading the content, or how you, in creating this film version, had that in mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that a large crux of the narrative of the show is struggle with mental health, and just sort of like the different facets of like how that struggle is tested in different facets of your life. And so like Rendezvous just like it seemed like the perfect venue for that, because I think that like Rendezvous has been really great at like curating interesting conversations that aren't necessarily like super didactic about mental health as a topic, which is really great because I mean, you know, this show isn't super didactic about anything. It's, you know, it's probably really easy to assume that it's about nothing, and you're probably right. But I mean, you know, right from like the struggle of making the work just seriously deteriorated my mental health, almost to the point that like as I was making the work, you know, in thesis, I was like rewriting it to like be about the struggle of making it, because it's like I wrote that whole first monologue about like feeling like a failure as an artist, because I was like, I want to do this thing and it's not happening. So then I kind of like wrote that, and you know, and that's how and I was like, I heard about this like myth of the genius. I think it was like a Greek or a Roman thing, that one of my painting teachers mentioned. So I was like, oh, I need one of those. So I was like, I'm going to write a show about needing one of those. And then in terms of translating it into a film, how mental health impacted it, I don't know if I was necessarily thinking so much about mental health in terms of how it affects the nature of it as a film necessarily. But I think that what a film offers me is the ability to come up to things like really closely and like zoom into things, as much as like, you know, I don't actually have any close range shots, which is something that I regretted. But like I was able to like highlight specific things, and it, like I was able to almost create, because it's not live in a room where like you as an audience member are able to see like a physical being. Like you're able to like lean into more of the idea of that, like this is happening in a mental space, this is happening in the capacity of like an inner dialogue.
Yeah.
Which, so like being able to like lean into that illusion a little bit more, I think was really beneficial.
Awesome. We do have a question from Kurt, who says, love the movie, first of all, so great. Can you speak about the inspiration for the various characters that you embody throughout the work? Are they based on personal experiences or individuals in your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that they kind of came in disparate ways, and like some of them were characters that I had used several times. So in my first year, I took an animation class, and I made a little project where it was like a bunch of like short, almost like GIF length animations that I had like made like a 5-minute like supercut of all these different GIF like animations. And one of those was like this human suit wearing person with a fly head just like floating. And so I decided to lift that character for this show. And I almost created like the antithesis of like the Jiminy Cricket, which is Jimmy the Fly. which is, you know, kind of like this idea of like having a conscience, like a physical embodiment of the conscience, but in this kind of like hokey Disney way, but like in a sort of like Tim Burton, like bastardized kind of like cynical like way. There was another thing that Jimmy was like that I was thinking of recently, but I can't remember what I was thinking. I was like, oh, it's also like that too, but I couldn't tell you. The genius was completely brought about like by that conversation with my painting teacher, where she was talking about this mythology where some culture, I think it was either Greek or Roman, believed in like the idea of a genius. I guess that's where the word came from, which is like this spirit that like the artist would be able to channel and like make the work, almost like the artists themselves were incapable of doing the thing. They needed this like divine intervention. And so I lifted that concept and I decided to like add this like weird, like Dr. Ursula is like a reference. Like I very much try to reference the Little Mermaid signing her voice away scene, that kind of dynamic. And then the receptionist character was lifted from a performance piece I did the year before, where I created this like fake waiting room where I would like get an audience member to like walk in, and I was playing this like receptionist character, and a lot of the script is actually lifted in that, and that I was trying to inflict an experience of anxiety in the viewer, and that like you're sort of like stuck in this room and you're being confronted with like sensory overload, but like I as a character am not acknowledging that that's happening, and I'm also sort of like probing you with these like absurdist questions, and so a lot of that was like lifted and put into the show. And I think that those are basically the major characters, is like me, Jimmy, the genius, and the receptionist character, who everybody loves.
Can I do a quick follow-up on that?
Yeah.
Because you know who else the receptionist reminded me of? The Computer Says No woman from Little Britain. I don't know if you know.
I've never seen that.
But she has such a sort of wonderfully kind of archetypical comedic, you know, and I think the genius also has a different kind of comedic, but much sort of like weightier presence. But there was something about the sort of the way in which you introduce the idea of bureaucracy and the idea of barriers to access to well-being through humor. Can you just make a brief comment on that, because I think we're also kind of running close to time.
Absolutely. I mean, it's and like that's sort of like a conversation that has come up, like even as I've done that other piece a couple times, is that like, you know, like as someone like who has like mental health afflictions, like dealing with bureaucracy like that can feel so inhibiting, and like in a way where it's like even if the other person isn't being antagonistic, or like if you're looking at a system which like inherently it doesn't care about anything, like let alone you. It doesn't have like an emotional empathetic, it's just a concept. But like it can feel in those moments like the entire world is against you, or like it morphs into this thing where it's like you become like this diminutive thing in comparison to it. And so that's sort of like what I kind of tried to do in designing that character and that experience, is that like how do you demonstrate the true absurdity of these real life encounters, and that like, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily encounter the specific script that I'm using in this show. Like a receptionist wouldn't like barrage you with like those specific questions, but it feels that way. Like it really does. And so that was sort of like, I think that's where absurdist humor actually comes from, is it's not about like, what's the most outrageous thing to say? It's what's the most real thing to say? And how do I like say it in a way that like hasn't been said in reality, where you're like, that's strange, but like, that's actually the realest thing that anyone here has said. And I think that's really where the crux of a lot of the absurdist humor of the show and of me in general comes from, is like, I'm not interested in just being like the wacky person. That's just for me in my bedroom walls. But I think that, you know, that's where you can really twist the knife, is like, how do I present you something that's like exactly how it is, but in a way where you feel like it isn't. So you actually have to confront it yourself.
Fabulous. I just want to thank the two of you so much for the conversation, and for all of you who are tuning in. Really appreciate it. And the piece is available to view throughout the duration of the festival. So, you know, if you haven't tuned in yet and seen it, or if you know of other people who you think would really enjoy watching this amazing masterpiece, epic, beautiful thing, please spread the word. And thank you so much, Francisco, and thank you so much, Jane.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful.
And thanks everyone for coming and for watching it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Take good care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.